Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, my name's Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
Exceptionally well, Rory, and delighted to be here. Thank you for joining us for the Counselling Tutor Podcast. This is episode 115, and a really good episode today. We're going to be kicking off speaking about valuing yourself as a professional, a real interesting topic, and then moving on to growing as a therapist. Now, I assume we're not going to be watering ourselves or sitting on racks and pulling ourselves. Rory, what do you mean by growing as a therapist?
Well, I think it's interesting. There's no watering cans or medieval torture devices involved in this. But sometimes it can feel like a balance of nurturing yourself and developing yourself. And, sometimes a little bit of a painful growth as you grow out maybe of your base therapy and start to integrate other ideas. And I'm going to be talking about what you need to think about to grow as a therapist and, what that could look like.
Looking forward to that one. So that's In Practice Matters, and we're ending episode 115, speaking about the topic of how we can fill the time between training. So if you're a student and you're on a formal training course, you come to an academic break, what can you be doing during that academic break? Of course, besides a little bit of self-care and putting the feet up, but if you want to use that time productively, and I guess also that can apply to our qualified colleagues of how you might use time in between your CPD sessions for your ongoing continuous development as a professional counsellor. But let's kick it off, valuing yourself as a professional, Rory. And I do hear quite often that sometimes, particularly students who have just graduated or are about to graduate or going into placement, can slightly undervalue what they have to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes some of the placements can undervalue people. I've heard stories of placement therapists being asked to clean toilets and hoover the floor and that type of thing, like you'd ask a trainee psychiatrist to do that, or a trainee doctor, or a trainee dentist. And what I would say is that I hear a lot from students, and certainly through supervision through the years, where people say, "Well, I'm just a trainee." The mindset to have, I think, is that to your client, you're their counsellor. I used to say this when I taught again and again and again. People who have enrolled on counselling courses and got to practice level have earned the seat, or should have earned the seat. And when they're in front of a client, they are the client's counsellor. Yes, they're in training. Yes, there's a lot of work to do, as there is for all professionals who grow and develop in their practice. But the mindset should be you are the client's counsellor, because the client will see you as their counsellor. They won't say, "Oh, I've seen a trainee," or this person's just in college. It'll be, "I've been to see my counsellor." And that is what the reality of it, I think, Ken.
100%. And the topic is valuing yourself as a professional. And even as a qualified counsellor, sometimes we undervalue who we are and what it is that we have to offer. And that is kind of sometimes seen in going into private practice, asking for money, feeling shy to ask for money. And at the end of the day, this is a professional qualification that you're doing to become a counsellor. You're investing a lot of your time, your effort, your resources, your money. And it is so different to other courses in that it's not just about the work that you will do at the learning institution. There are practice hours of use that you spoke about, Rory, there of having to go into placement, and you're earning your place to be there. And I think that there is something in putting your shoulders back and standing proud for the professional that you are, whether you're just going into placement or whether you're coming out and you're going into your own private practice. And for the work that you put in, you deserve to be paid for that. I understand that as professionals that we are maybe serving a client group that can at some level be in difficulty or going through a hard time, but at the same time, you are bringing a professional skill to that relationship, and you deserve to be compensated for the studies you've done, the training that you have done, and the professional that you are.
Absolutely. And I know there's lots of voices within the profession who heartily are getting sick and tired of people posting adverts for volunteer qualified counsellors. Like you would post wanted volunteer psychiatrist, volunteering heart surgeon, And I think that, as therapists, we need to say, no, we're qualified people. We've invested a lot of money in our training. And if you want us, you flipping well pay for us. And also, I think that cascades down to the level of where people go into their placements. Placements should be very grateful that they have a group, a cohort of people right at the pinnacle of their training, not people who've qualified a few years ago, people who are learning the latest stuff, who are getting the latest information. In fact, when I interviewed Tim Bond, quite recently, who wrote Standard and Ethics in Counselling, he actually said, and I quote, "I'd be happy to be counselled by a trainee because they're probably going to be more attentive and probably going to be right at the peak of their learning." So, yeah, there is something about valuing yourself. And I just want to share just a little story. Many years ago when I was training counsellors, I was talking to a level 4 student, and she said, "Can I have a word with you, Roy?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And she said to me, I had to phone the GP up to make a referral, and the GP, the doctor, treated me like a fellow professional. And I said, "Well, why wouldn't they?"
Yes.
Why wouldn't they? And that's been my experience. If I've had to speak with other professionals, it's been a cordial, concordant dialogue between two professional people. And counselling is a profession. And I think that everybody, and I am talking everybody, so take of that what you want, should realise that people invest their time and their money to help people. Mental health is a big issue not just in the UK, but in the world. And that people who help people with mental health difficulties or emotional difficulties should be seen as professionals. So that's my mini diatribe over, Ken.
And I think that story is echoed many times over, and we certainly hear that not the story itself, but the tone of that story of undervaluing ourselves. And that's the topic, valuing yourself. And I think there's an element of ownership here, that we need to own who we are, what we do, the difference that it is making, and firstly see ourselves as the professionals that we are in order to be seen by others. And there may be those that are uninformed of what counselling is. I know before I started training, I had no idea what a counsellor was. And one of the first things I learnt in level 2 is definition of what a counsellor is. And it took me quite by surprise at what it was. And I can look at my own placement when I was working in a GP surgery. It was the first time that they had counselling within the surgery. And even the GPs didn't have a full understanding of what counselling was. They shared with me that on their training course, only a very tiny part, maybe an hour of the time in all of the years, was dedicated to what counselling was. So people may not understand what it is, who we are and what it is that we do, but we need to understand it first so that we can, again, stand with our shoulders back, upright, and be proud as the professionals that we are. We need to take ownership, I guess.
Absolutely. And in some cases, it can literally be a matter of life and death. I think that that's forgotten. If we have clients who are considering ending their lives and, they're in a position where they can't see the reason for going on living, a really good therapist, a caring person, listening to that and hearing that can really make the difference between someone deciding to take their life and move it forward and live their life and look at the difficulties and sadly ending it. And, I know from my experience and experience of other therapists, this happens more regularly than we'd like to think about.
I guess from a personal point, the people whose lives you make the biggest differences in, as a counsellor, you maybe don't get to hear that. In so many jobs, you're told what a great job you did. When you're the heart surgeon and you're doing all that kind of work, you're constantly being told what a great job you're doing and what a difference that is making. And very often with the people that we work with, we never see them again. The big difference that happens for them is in their lives post-therapy. They've had a change. They go out and they're better able to cope. So we're not getting that constant feedback. So we need to look within ourselves, realize what we're doing, the value of what we're doing, and be confident in that. What a topic, and I challenge those listening. What are you doing to value yourself as a professional? And of course, Rory, it just brings us so beautifully onto Practice Matters and the next topic, because we're speaking about growing as a therapist. And there is an ethical obligation that we grow as a qualified therapist, but this kind of links into being a student as well. What you do with your downtime, what you do if there's an academic break. How do we continue to grow as a therapist? Can you give us like a little bit of seasoning, salt and pepper of what we can expect in Practice Matters?
I'll give you a soup song, Ken, of what I'm going to be talking about, and maybe it's about, a lot of people are very loyal to their meta modality, and sometimes the pain of that is that a lot of the modalities were taught in the 1950s, and we live in the millennia. And we know more about neuroscience, we know more about trauma. And my challenge really, in terms of growing as a therapist, is that sometimes we have to develop and build upon the modality we're taught and not be purist.
Oh, it's already challenging me. I can feel my purist, person-centered hairs tingling on the back of my neck as you say that, Rory. So let's get into Practice Matters with Rory after this very short message.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
I've always believed that the client guides our path. As therapists, where they go, we follow. Most paths have forks where you may need to take a detour. These usually appear when, as professionals, we meet clients who challenge our primary model of therapy, or we struggle to enter the client's frame of reference. My first fork in the road came about when I first practiced as a school counsellor. For a long time, I believed and bought into the purity of my approach. It soon became apparent that I needed to expand my knowledge of the client group and my therapeutic interventions, so I enrolled in a child and adolescent therapy course. A year or so later, another fork in the road appeared, that of working with grief, so I took a loss and bereavement course. Through the years, I've taken quite a few detours from the path I started on. The most recent was attending a course on neurobiology and trauma. In my supervision sessions, I would reflect that some of the detours felt like betraying the clear, pure path I started on. It felt, quite frankly, uncomfortable. Then one day, while out walking in the hills near where I live, I found myself taking a different route to my favourite tea room, and it felt very unfamiliar, a little rocky and quite unsafe underfoot. At the end of this path, I realised that my detour had got me to my favourite tea room safe and sound. So I consider my additional learning like my walking gear, which comprises of sturdy boots, warm socks, a water-resistant coat, and my trusty Jeep cap, and a small compass to keep me heading in the right direction. Therapeutically, I still walk the same person-centred path. I am now just better equipped if the client wants to take a detour onto unfamiliar or rocky terrain.
Thank you as always, Rory. Truly informative, and I guess with the academic break upon us, some food for thought for those of us who may be putting our feet up. And as always, you can get Rory's super duper handout from Practice Matters, and it's free. All you need to do is go to our website, which is counsellingtutor.com. That's 2 L's in the word counselling, because we are based in the United Kingdom. Counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcast tab, which you'll find at the very top of the page. Go to episode 115, that's 115, that's today's episode. Everything we've spoken about is précédé on that page. We call it our show notes, so you can kind of get a bite size, get all the information we've spoken about in one bite, as well as any links to external resources that we may find that link into today's topic. And you can download Rory's handout free of charge from within the page by just popping in your name and your email address, and we will send that directly to your inbox. And of course, if you're one of our valued members of our paid for resource, which is called the Counselor's Resource, Counselling Study Resource, then just log in. It is there waiting for you in your handouts vault. Moving on, and we're going to be ending episode 115 today on the topic of how to fill your time between your training courses.
Absolutely. And one of the things, certainly in the UK, is usually the courses go by academic year. So what happens is you finish your level 2. Now, level 2s are usually 10-week courses here in the UK. And if you start your 10-week course in September, you're usually done and dusted by Christmas, which means you've got a whole kind of 8 months to wait until the course starts again. You go on to the level 3. And if you've done a level 3 and you're going on to level 4, the same thing applies, really. You've got the summer break to kind of traverse, if that's the word, before you start. And a lot of students in the past have contacted me and said, what can I do in the break? How can I keep up? And basically, my view would be to try and think about the kind of things you may be asked in the next course. You've covered those topics to most courses are structured. They're like a building block, a scaffold, if you like. So you start off with level 2 and you cover theories at a very basic level. And then at level 3, you go into them a little bit deeper. And level 4, you go into them deeper still, and you're asked to apply them to yourself as well as your clients when you're practicing. So you could start off by looking at what you've studied and try to gain more information. So usually you study theory, you study ethics, you study skills, and you study personal development. So you could start off by just making a list, and I'm going to study a little bit more about the theory I've been taught. It's usually in the UK person-centered theory, but you could look at transactional analysis, you could look at cognitive behavioral therapy, you could look at Freud if you want to have a very deep dive, and you could get some ideas and study. And there's no better place to get that information than from our website, counsellingtutor.com, because we have a lot of the modalities on the site. You just go into the site, drop down, and you can find lots of information about the kind of modes, modalities that you're going to be studying. Really, really useful. And of course, it's really useful if you're doing interviews. If you're going for an interview for your next course, if you can evidence that you've done some study, then that will always put you in a good light speaking as an ex-tutor.
Yeah, tell me about it. It does. It really, really works, and we get that feedback all the time from fellow students on our Facebook group. And of course, if that's something you can do. If you're not a member of the Counselling Tutor Facebook group, that's a way you can fill your time in between training courses. Come and join, because there are tens of thousands of like-minded students, qualified counsellors, tutors, supervisors who hang out on the Counselling Tutor Facebook page, and we have discussions all the time on the topics of counselling. And you can find our Facebook group by just going to Facebook and typing in Counselling Tutor. It really is as simple as that. It's a closed group because it's for counsellors and psychotherapists. So just knock on the door, let us know who you are, and we will open it and warmly welcome you in. But you're 100% right, Rory, and you're talking about that spending your time, how to use your time, revisiting the theories. And I think that this extends beyond training. I really do. You know, Carl Rogers mentions that he speaks about a way of being as a counsellor. It is a way of being. It's less about what you do, what you know. It is a way of being. And being a counsellor for me is about a way of being. It is a lifestyle. It's about submerging yourself into that lifestyle. And what can you do to do that? Well, you can listen to the Counselling Tutor podcast. You're doing that right now. That is submerging yourself. You may be driving your car. You may be having a jog. You may be formally sitting down listening to this. However you choose to consume it, you've got information coming your way. You're hearing trigger words. You're hearing topics around counselling, and it is, I guess, increasing your awareness as a practitioner. Reading industry publications like the BACP release a regular publication. Just reading through it, paging through it. You're not formally studying, but you're submerging yourself, soaking yourself in the material. And as you said, Rory, Counselling Tutor Podcast, absolutely brimming with great content. And if you have become a member of our paid-for resource, the Counselling Study Resource, well, firstly, thank you. We value you. But also, just bob into the Counselling Study Resource. There are over 60 hours of CPD-linked lectures where you can pop on a lecture, revisit a topic, have a look at a new topic, educate yourself, and kind of, again, just steep yourself in the theory, in the practice, listen to some skills,
Absolutely. And also, I think there's some value in familiarization. There's nothing worse than sitting in the class and having a whole load of vocabulary thrust upon you that you think, well, interjected values, injunctions and drivers, automatic negative thoughts, they're new ideas. And if you're engaging with them for the first time, you can get mind block, you can get overload. But if you've already engaged with that, if you've already done some study and these terms are familiar to you, then you don't have to worry about kind of the shock of the new vocabulary. You can just then develop on what you know. You can just fill the gaps in using your study to develop and enhance and expand your knowledge. So that's another really good reason. If I go to any CPD course, I will do my reading first. I will do my study first before I engage in it, because then I've got an overview of it, and then I can take the meat and potatoes of the training and really engage with it, as opposed to getting stuck with what does this word mean and what does that word mean. And you do hear it. I've been to courses where people say, can you tell me what polyvagal means? Or can you tell me what the amygdala is? And that's fine, but if you know that before you go, then all you have to do then is just to fill the gaps of your knowledge in. So really useful, and there's so much out there. Certainly, as Ken said on the Counselling Tutor Facebook page, loads of stuff in there.
So I just want to mention here, as we kind of come to the end of episode 115, we've mentioned kind of what you can do in between your counselling training course, how you can enrich yourself. We've spoke about growing as a helper. So there's a lot of learning there and steeping yourself in that knowledge, as it were. I'm seeing myself being dipped in the vat of knowledge here, Rory. I've got a picture, a metaphor playing out. It's not really a metaphor, is it? This picture. And Rory, to kind of let the cat at least peek out of the bag, although not the cat directly out of the bag, I know that you have been working extensively on this topic, looking at the upcoming academic break. If you're listening to this in real time, we're about to hit the academic break here in the UK, and it's the biggie, it's the big summer holiday for our counselling study resource members. And you're speaking about like a summary school type of thing, where we might put on events and a lot more stuff that people can kind of engage with over that time to bridge that gap and to keep in touch, because there's nothing worse, I guess, than cutting it all off, going, you know what, I'm not going to look at that now for the next 3 to 6 weeks, and then going back to it again, and everything is kind of, it's almost like starting the car again from a cold engine, as opposed to keeping it running in the background on a less with less commitments of having deadlines and assignments and reports to put in.
Absolutely. Well, without letting the entire cat out of the bag on that feline metaphor, not that anybody at Counselling Tutor keeps cats in bags, just to be clear on that. Yes.
The complaints will be pouring in, Rory.
Don't put cats in bags is the message here. But to give you a little peek, we're going to be running a summer school. One of the wonderful things about being a former lecturer of counselling, both myself and Ken, is that we absolutely know the kind of things that students want to get involved in through the quite a large in the UK academic break. And we're going to be running a summer school of really key topics that students of all levels who are progressing on really need to know before they engage in their courses. So the super turned on students will be tuning into that, and they'll be getting all that knowledge, like Ken and myself do, before we go to CPD, so that when we sit in the class, we're not concerned, we're not anxious, we're not caught in the headlights. We've got a good underpin to go forward and to really get that information and make the most of our studies.
Love it. What an episode. Full of enrichment, I guess, today. This has been episode 115. Rory, speak us through what we've learned today.
Yes, well, we talked about right at the beginning, value yourself as a professional and hold your head up high. In Practice Matters, I've talked about growing pains and moving forward, maybe from the modality of your therapy. And finally, we looked at filling the time between courses, keeping your knowledge high, so that, again, when you go into your classes, you can feel super confident and really ready to rock and roll. And, hey, as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.